Recording has started. Just waiting for the final tick over at 5 o'clock. Councillors, thank you for attending electronically for this ordinary meeting of Council on Tuesday the 20th of April 2020 at 5 p.m. As always, we start by respectfully acknowledging the Yamatji people, who are the traditional owners, the first people of the land on which, well, at least we are meeting at the moment, and probably where you are as well. And I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and future, for they hold the memories, traditions, culture and hopes of the Yamatji people. Today we have everybody present. There are no apologies, no leave of absence, no members of the public. So we'll move to item 4, disclosure of interests. Councillor Hall has declared a proximity interest in item DCS 447, proposed local planning scheme amendment, tourism rezoning Mahomet's Flats, as he lives in said suburb. Councillors, I note there are no other conflicts of interests. If there are, please speak up now. There are none. Item 5, response to previous public questions taken on notice. There are none. Councillors, we now move to public question time. I wish to move that by absolute majority, pursuant to section 16.1 of the City of Greater Geraldton Meeting Procedures Local Law 2011, that we suspend operation of clause 5.71 for the duration of this electronic meeting, and that the matters be determined at the discretion of the presiding member. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Colliver, thank you very much. Does anyone wish to speak to this item? Councillors, given that there is no debate on that item, I'll declare that motion carried. That takes us to public question time, and just for the record, of course, we suspended the meeting procedures to take advantage of questions that were sent in electronically, as obviously public people cannot be present today. So my first question was from Philippa Glynn, Director of Nino Farm Proprietary Limited, 265 George Road, Geraldton, W8 6530. And she states, I represent Nino Farm Proprietary Limited, who are the owners of 168 to 172 Marine Terrace building, the Isles building. We have for some time been denied the use of our right-of-way for our business and for our tenants in relation to the above memorial. As the dominant tenement, there should be tenant and owner and tenant of the Isles building, we are entitled to enjoy the benefit of the easement. The rights of the owner and tenants of the, keeps changing its spelling, Isles building to pass and repass at all times has been denied by the issue of the alfresco licence. We would like the following questions to be asked of Council. And she asks, how is it that an alfresco licence has been issued when there is a right of carriage way over the land that entitles pass and repass at any time? She has a second question. Can Council please advise how they intend to resolve this issue so that the owners, tenants, servants, agents, workmen and visitors are able to pass and repass at all times? Director Melling, are you replying to that?
Yes.
Director Melling.
Thank you for the question. Both parties have previously been advised on a number of occasions this is actually a civil matter. If they're not able to work through a practical solution, then they do have a legal recourse through the court system to address their access requirements.
Thank you, Director Melling. We have no further questions. So we have, as you will notice there, we did have approved existing leave for Councillor Tanti, but he is in attendance, and Councillor Critch is also in attendance as she cancelled her leave of absence. Councillors, I haven't got any other further leave of absence. If anyone does, can you please speak up now? There are none. Item 8, petitions and deputations. There are none. Item 9, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, just a reminder, when moving a motion, ask a question, just please state your name first. I probably will recognise your voice, but in case I get 3 or 4 of you, just give me a chance.
Councillor Thomas.
Councillor Thomas, you're moving that the minutes be accepted?
Happy to move.
Thank you. Seconder?
Councillor Colliver.
Councillor Colliver, you're seconding. Just remember, councillors, I know you're all on mute, but just remember that you need to turn mute back off if you wish to jump in. It's just going to be something to get used to. Is there anyone in opposition to confirmation of minutes? There being none, I'll declare that item carried. Item 10, the announcements by the Chair and presentations.
Yeah, Councillor Keemick.
Councillor Keemick.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick update on the 14th of April, the cruise ship update. Please.
Yeah, sure. So that was around the 14th of April. It was confirmed that the cruise ships were no longer going to be coming to Geraldton up until the year 2022 at the earliest, and they wanted some comments on what impacts that might have for the city, both economically and by way of promoting tourism.
Thank you.
No further questions. Item 11, unresolved business from previous meetings. There are none. Item 12, reports of community officers. Item 12.1, reports of development and community services. Item DSC 446, approval of local planning scheme amendment, omnibus amendment.
I'll move it, Your Worship.
Councillor Hall.
Councillor Thomas.
Councillor Thomas, you're seconding. Wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Hall.
No, I think it's all self-explanatory, Your Worship, in respects to what's required, and it's been a long time in happening.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas? No wish to speak?
No, nothing to add.
Do you wish to speak against this item? No speakers? I declare that motion carried unanimously. Item DCS 447, proposed local planning scheme amendment, tourism rezoning, Mohammed's Flats.
Happy to move, Mr Mayor. Councillor Colliver.
Councillor Colliver.
Councillor Douglas, I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. You're seconding. Speak to your motion, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I note that this one's a standard amendment, and its current use is consistent with the tourism zone anyway, the tourism zoning, which they're asking for the amendment to be, and that it will go out for public consultation. So that gives the public an opportunity to comment if they so wish, and then it will come back to us, so we have another opportunity to approve this at a later date. So I would ask that my fellow councillors support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to add that currently it is zoned R40 as outlined in our papers, and there are 17 chalets currently there on 0.61 hectares, which is 6,100 square metres. The land could, at the moment, take another 3 or 4 chalets, as I understand it, under the R40 zoning. R80 could more than double the number of dwellings on that particular parcel of land. That just needs to be understood. R40 to R80 will take it into something in the 40s, and I've checked that with Mr Melling. And that's okay, but potentially there could be some issues around traffic and obviously the surrounding residential areas. That's why it is important that it does go out to public comment as indicated in the papers, which it will. And I understand, being a standard amendment, the public comment period is about 42 days. Is that correct, Mr Melling?
Director Melling.
Through the chair, thank you. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so on that basis, which it is important that we do get that public comment. I'm certainly supportive of it, but it is important that we get that public comment as well. So I'm happy for this to proceed, and as my colleague Councillor Colliver has suggested, it'll come back to us for deliberation at that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Speakers against? Any other speakers? There being no speakers, no intention to vote against, we'll declare that item carried unanimously. Item DCS 448, surrender of lease and new lease, Marine Rescue Geraldton.
I'll move it, Your Worship.
Councillor Hall, you're moving.
I'm happy to second, Mr Mayor. Sandy?
We're moving the executive recommendation as presented. To speak to your motion, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just purely and simply, it's a matter of process with respect to these people, the work that they do, and it's keeping in line with the leases on Point More. I think it's just part of the course and clean housekeeping on our behalf as a local government authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tanti as seconder.
Yes, Mr Mayor, nothing to add.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak to this item speak against this item? There being no opposition, I'll declare that motion carried. Item DCS 449, lease Veteran Car Club of WA Midwest Branch.
Happy to move that motion, Mr Mayor. Councillor Colliver.
Yeah, Keemick second.
Councillor Keemick seconding. Thank you. Speak to a motion, councillor.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. This is just a standard lease request. The Midwest Veteran Car Club is a long-established group in the Midwest. They've been there a long time. They do some really great stuff with the gorgeous cars that they have and that they use around the community for shows and for the school balls. And I'm happy to support this extension because I think they're a really good community group. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keemick.
No, thanks. Councillor Colliver has said everything.
Thank you. Do we have anyone wishing to speak against this item? There being no opposition, I shall declare that motion carried unanimously. Item 12.2, Reports of Corporate and Commercial Services. Item CCS 481, Council Policy 4.29, Attendance at Events.
Councillor Tanti, I'm happy to move, Mr Mayor.
Are you moving, Councillor Tanti?
Happy to
No, second, Mr Mayor. Councillor Fiorenza.
Councillor Fiorenza, you're seconding. To speak to your motion, councillor.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Really nothing to add. I just support the executive recommendation, and I think it's just a matter of process once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fiorenza, to speak.
No, just said it is a much needed initiative with the things that are going on at the moment. So really nothing to add, Mr Mayor.
Councillors, I'll, as this involves us directly, I'll now put it to the votes. That's going to, remember, that's going to require you to type a yes or a no. Works.
I can see Councillor Fiorenza, Thomas, Critch,
Test
Douglas,
myself on this.
Keemick, David Cobra.
Timothy. He obviously moved. Paul seconded. Yep. Thank you, councillors. That motion is carried unanimously. Sorry to do that to you, so I just want to get that one out of the way before a bit later on. Just work out how smoothly that's going to be. Item CCS 482, Council Policy 4.17, Public Interest Disclosure.
Councillor Critch, I'll move it.
Happy to second, Councillor Colliver.
Thank you, Councillor Critch. Seconded, Councillor Colliver. To speak to your motion, Councillor Critch.
No, just to say I support the executive recommendation, and I hope everyone else does too. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Colliver.
Other than to say that having the procedure for the public transparency disclosure available on the website actually cancels out the need for the policy. So this is just a matter of good governance and a little bit of good housekeeping. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against this item? If there are no speakers, we'll declare that motion carried. Item CCS 483, waive the 2019-2020 sporting ground user fees.
Happy to move, Mr Mayor. Councillor Colliver.
Yep. Councillor Colliver, you're moving. Fiorenza, you're seconding.
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Colliver.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. This item actually provides equity to both the winter and summer sports. Note that the winter sports item will come up later on in this agenda. And it actually provides some financial relief to local communities in response to COVID-19. It is our role as councillors to support our community as best we can, whilst making good governance and financial decisions for the greater good. I believe this decision to be a decision that is good governance, and it is for the greater good. So I hope my fellow councillors will support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fiorenza. If you can unmute yourself, Councillor Fiorenza.
I agree with Councillor Colliver. It is a common sense initiative, and in this current climate, it only just makes sense. So I fully endorse Councillor Colliver's views.
Right, thank you. Speaker against?
Mr Mayor, Councillor Tanti.
Yep, Councillor Tanti.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'm opposed to this waiving. Most of the activities of those involved in summer sports over 2019-20 were finalised. We had grand finals in basketball, softball and water polo. Almost got there with cricket, but even without the grand finals, the cricket seasons were 95% played and the juniors were all completed. There is, in my view, no need to waive ground user fees for the summer. Let's also remember that ratepayers, including those with no interest in a particular sport, or indeed any sport, also pay to maintain grounds and facilities. It's only fair that those who use the city's playing fields and other facilities continue to pay the prescribed fee. I see no need for this move to waive the fees, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker for. Another speaker against? No further speakers. Councillor Colliver, your right of reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just further to Councillor Tanti's comments, I do note that he has said that there are a lot of other ratepayers out there that don't participate in sports, and that is correct, but you will note that there is an item coming up later in this agenda in terms of our intent for the rate setting notice that does actually take into consideration all ratepayers across the city, and we will be how we support all of our ratepayers across the city in response to COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, I now put this item to the vote.
Did mine come through, Mr Mayor?
And just working through it.
No, it hasn't been.
Yes, yours has come through. Douglas and Hall. So you can see the pace at which I'm going to be working at a bit later on. Councillor Hall, I don't have your vote.
That's the second time I've typed in yes and no response has come up on the screen.
That's right, I'll take your yes then verbally, that's cool. Giving is a no. Yes.
There you go. Helps if I type in the right spot.
happens. Councillor Douglas, vote.
So that item is carried 10-3. Which is an absolute majority. Next item is item CCS 484, Statement of Financial Activity to 31 March 2020.
I'll move it, Your Worship. No one else is.
Councillor Hall.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor. Councillor Colliver.
Colliver, thank you very much. To speak to your motion, Councillor Hall.
I reserve the right, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Colliver.
Yeah, likewise, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to indicate an intention to speak against this item?
Not against, Mr Mayor, but can I just ask a question?
You certainly can. Question, Councillor Douglas.
Okay, Mr Douglas. Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's an update since that report, and in terms of what for the year 1920, especially with staff coming back now as well, which is great. Just wondering what the implications are of where we are at the moment and how we're trending, if that's okay.
Director Adolph.
I had a quick view of our position coming towards the end of April. As expected, we've had further decline in revenue. So there's been no real impact to employment costs whatsoever because we budget for full employment. So That's still tracking to budget. Yes, as suggested in this monthly report, we would start seeing the full impact or the impacts coming into play regarding revenue decline. So that's more evident, and you'll see that in the next monthly report. So yes, our position has deteriorated in regards to getting into a surplus position at the end of the year. So we're still predicting that we'll be in some form of deficit by the end of the financial year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Speaker against? So anyone intending to vote against this item, speak now. There are none. I'll declare that motion carried. Next item is item CCS 485, rates 2020-21, notice of intention. I wish to move from the chair a motion that, for those that have got the record that's been sent around, it's the same as the executive recommendation, with the exception that 3% discount for rates paid in full by the designated due date be lifted to 10% discount for rates paid in full by the designated due dates. And it also adds in the additional points that there will be no increase to the current rubbish collection charges in 2021. And note that the city will continue to apply the rates and interest charges as advised and set by the state government for the Emergency Services Levy ESL for Category 2, 4 and 5 as at 1 July 2020. Do I have a second?
Happy to second.
That, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Caldwell.
Oliver.
Sorry, Councillor Colliver, you were just in there first.
Yep, happy to second, thank you.
Thank you, you're seconding. So, I'll get ready for this one. Right, thank you, councillors. So, as we've heard just recently from Director Radaj, and indeed we've been talking extensively now for the last couple of months, there's a significant fall in revenue, but we're sort of getting better at getting our heads around what that'll look like, what those numbers will be, and certainly as we've got budget deliberations to continue on as a council, we still have another month or two of time before we have to consider as a council the budget and what actions we will take. We'll also continue to get more increased certainty over time. However, the big unknown for us as a council is the collectability of rates. And particularly of concern for me is knowing that government stimulus payments like the JobKeeper payment expire in September, which is only a month after the rates notices actually the first instalment becomes due. And indeed the remaining stimulus, remaining instalments will fall due after that. That's a significant portion of our population that will be on JobKeeper, probably anywhere up to a third of all workers in Geraldton. We need to get the cash in. Yes, it's one way to it's money that we won't be getting. It could be a loss, but it isn't money that we've yet budgeted for. As such, other inside our long-term financial plan. It will be a need for council to deliberate on upcoming budget workshops to work out how that could be funded, or what services and what service levels we'll have, and what other provisions we might make for that. That's not the point of the motion exempt today. It's just try and set out our main core strategy for getting in the cash, because if you don't collect the cash, it's all well and good raising rates notices, but if you don't get the money, you won't have the cash. So if we can stimulate in desire of people to pay up front, I don't feel that 3% is enough of a carrot in this instance. Given that we are waiving all interest and instalment charges for people that pay their rates, and noting, of course, that our pensioners don't even have to pay their rates. They can actually defer them to their estate. We have a number of pensioners that take us up on that offer too. It might actually stimulate to see some of the cash actually coming in. Cash will be king going forward this year. We need to know how much we've got so that we can quicker and more efficiently either continue to reopen facilities, bring staff back, all those sorts of things. Because without certainty, we're going to be absolutely flying blind. So and on the flip side of this, it does give people genuine rate relief. Next year will be a revaluation year. So no discount or incentive system that you put in place next year will do anything to incentivise anybody. There'll be, as is always the case, revaluations will go up and down and all over the show. So you're really going to get one crack at this. And that's why I think we should go hard this year. And the reason it's a discount for early payment is so it doesn't embed itself in the long-term financial plan, in the operating statements at least anyway. The motion is to only apply this, as I should have noted earlier, only in 2021 to try and stimulate and work out the effects of what they look like. And look, we have a mid-year budget review too, councillors, and whilst rates will be struck for that year, it does allow us to track exactly where we're going and work out what we do in future rate and budget deliberations next year, which again will be a revaluation year, and no amount of incentives will work in that environment. Councillor Colliver.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item actually gives us a really great opportunity to demonstrate some community leadership in response to COVID-19. I am in support of the 10% rates discount as an incentive for early payment of rates. I can see the benefit of this, particularly to commercial property ratepayers and probably our farming community out there as well. You know, those people have multiple property and multiple land holdings. Early payment will assist for cash flow. The current COVID-19 crisis has us facing many challenges. It has also seen all levels of government looking for ways to adapt and innovate in response to these challenges. This creates an opportunity for us at the local government level to innovate in ways we would never have considered before. I consider the rates discount as such an opportunity to pilot a different way of doing things. We also only have the 2021 budget year to pilot and innovate budget changes. As the Mayor has said, you know, we have the revaluations the following year, which actually will stifle any innovation that we might, you know, have thought about, and won't give us an opportunity to do that. So I think that it is really important that we look at this as a way to do something different to support our community. It will also give us some really good data to have a look at in following years about how this may or may not have worked. We won't know if we don't actually give it a go. So I would ask my fellow councillors to actually think about this. It's a really great opportunity to show our community leadership and to do something a little bit different to support our ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Colliver. Councillor Keeming, you have a question. Councillor Keeming, are you on mute?
It's all right. I'm back. What percentage pay up front normally anyway, please?
Director Adalj.
It's around about 20 million, so that equates to about between 45 and 50%.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So now I call for a speaker against. So in the against.
Mr. Mayor, can I move an amendment, please?
Yes, you may, Councillor Douglas.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment just to change 10% to 5%. The rest of it absolutely as is. So I think that's just an amendment, not a change of motion.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that, Councillor. I'll accept that as an amendment.
Can I?
Do I have a second?
Can I move that amendment, please?
Yes, you've moved the amendment that the 10 reduces to 5. Do I have a seconder?
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Tanti, I have a question, but I will second the 5%. However, if that's appropriate to do so now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to get the order right. Yeah. So you're going to second the reduction to 5?
Yep, Tanti, yes, Mr. Mayor. But I have a question later because I have an amendment, but we'll come to that, I'm sure.
Councillor Douglas, you get to speak to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Tanti. At least I can put the arguments forward and we can perhaps go from there. I've got a couple of points that are perhaps a little bit different to what have been mentioned. Some are similar, but here we go. I think first of all, I think the 10% is overly generous, and I think it potentially could put us into a little bit more financial difficulty down the track, but I'll make that case in just a minute. The 5% I think is reasonable. The average ratepayer pays around about 2,300. 5% will save the average ratepayer over $100, $115. And I think anything with a triple figure in front of it, I think will certainly catch people's attention. I think we also got to consider that the 5% comes on top of the 1.5% that would have been levied this year or imposed this year, which we are not. So even the 10% was really effectively at 11.5%. The 5% is effectively 6.5%. And the 6.5% basically saves the average ratepayer over $150. That's not inconsiderable. I think we've got to remember the 1.5% that's already been foregone. The other thing I'd like to mention is that the 5% will see the city forego $1.1 million. That is, if, as in previous years, 50% of ratepayers pay on time. The 10% will see the city forego $2.2 million, double that, of course. Now, you might say, well, there's only another $1.1 million, but let's look at a couple of things. It's my understanding that the city currently has loans tallying over around $35 million. Our annual interest bill, if I am correct, is around about $4.5 million. Our revenue this year is going to decline somewhere around $15 million. Yes, that's based on a worst case scenario, but it's going to be probably, I would have thought, at least 7 or 8, maybe towards 15 if it gets really bad. So we've got big loans on the books, interest to pay, our revenues way down. And I think we also have to consider the impact of a big discount now on future budgets. And what happens next year? Yes, we have revals, but we're going to add 10% for a start to a lot of people, and maybe the 1.5, I don't know how that's going to play out. So I think next year people will get could end up with a bit of a shock rather than perhaps a pleasant surprise. So with the fee waiver, the cost for the other fee waivers is around about $3 million. The 5% that I'm proposing is another 1.1. That takes it to about 4.1 or so. And don't forget the 1.5% that we are not imposing, which is foregone as well. That's about another 750,000. So 5%, the fee waivers, the 1.5% that's foregone, we're talking about something around about $4.8 million of relief, of direct relief that the city is given to all its ratepayers. And I just want to reiterate that we still have loans on our books of $35 million and our interest rate is 4.5. The relief right across the board between rates and the fee waivers, as mentioned by Councillor Colliver before, goes right across the board, and I think it should be well received. Lastly, I just want to mention key messages. I think we can sell 5% if the messages from both the Mayor and the CEO are very strong on this basis. That is, we're not doing the 1.5, we're back to 0, but not only that, we're giving you a 5% discount. Not only that, we're giving you fee waivers that are amounting to over $3 million. And on top of all that, we want those that can pay, please do pay, because that allows the city to get on with its business, to provide the services and keep its staff providing those services. My last point is, if push comes to shove, and as per the papers, the city can go to Treasury and get, hopefully, in the current environment, a low interest loan that'll get us through the cash process. So I'm actually urging everyone to support a 5% increase for the reasons I've just outlined. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tandy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to go with the 5%, but I'm not happy with the waiving of fees and charges. A question, if I could, has the government locked in that there won't be any penalty interest or instalment charges or payment plan charges? Is that certain?
No, they have not as of yet. So, Councillor Tandy, you've muted yourself again.
Sorry, beg your pardon, Mr. Mayor. No, well, I won't support the motion in that case, Mr. Mayor. I think
Councillor Tandy,
we are in a...
Councillor Tandy, you're seconding the motion. You're seconding the amendment.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Mayor. I'm seconding the 5%, but not 0.4, if that makes sense. Yeah. I may have thrown things out there.
Just a little.
Okay.
So you're supporting the amendment to 5 for the purposes of this motion. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
So you want to speak to your the amendment?
To my amendment or?
No, to Steve's amendment.
Oh, okay. Yep. I support the 5%. I think that's a good number. I think 10% is too generous. I think we need to remember that. I think the worst of the virus has passed, and we need to be careful not to make too many cuts in revenue, because I do believe the worst of the virus has passed, and hopefully there'll be a recovery around Australia that will follow, and it'll be a nice, strong recovery. With regard to the fee waivers, I'm totally opposed to that, Mr. Mayor, and I haven't got more to say about that until we get to my amendment. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, a speaker against the amendment. Councillor Thomas. Oh, Councillor Thomas.
Did you get my comment?
Yes. Yep. You used to speak against.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
We are all in really uncertain times at the moment, and I really applaud the Mayor in putting his motion forward for 10%. This is just to consider. It's nothing more. It is a starting point of considering. If we go with Councillor Douglas's amendment of 5, it's very hard to go up, but to come down from 10% is a lot easier. So I am talking against Councillor Douglas' amendment, and because of the uncertainty times, and it's only just to consider it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Speaker 4.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Caldwell, I'll speak for.
Speaking for the reduction to 5. Councillor Caldwell.
I'm sorry, we're still on the amendment. I withdraw that request to speak.
Speaker against?
Yeah, Councillor Parker.
Councillor Parker.
I'd just like to applaud what Councillor Douglas said, but in the rates that go around, the average person pays about $2,800 with rates, which Rubbish and Midwest Disaster or Fire Brigade, those rates don't come into the equation. So on a saving of 5% is only $120 for the ordinary person on rates. I'm against any rate deductions, as there'll be an amendment brought up later on with a bit of a waiver. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking against. Speaker 4.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Caldwell to speak against Councillor Douglas's amendment.
So one thing, I'm calling for another speaker 4.
Oh, okay.
There's no speaker 4. Speaker against, Councillor Caldwell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. My view on this is that the Mayor's motion has set the discount right, if it's to be a material discount and a considerable discount at 10%. I don't believe 5% will get the job done. I don't think that it's sufficient, and so I wouldn't support Councillor Douglas's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker 4.
Yeah, Councillor Keaming.
Councillor Keaming.
Yeah, thank you. I support Councillor Douglas's 5% amendment. I think it's a good start. I do think 10% is a tad generous, and we're in uncertain economic times, and I think 5% is a good carrot for people. So for that reason, I like Councillor Douglas's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Fiorenza.
Councillor Fiorenza.
This obviously goes to Paul. We just talked a moment ago, I think you said, Paul, about the amount of rates that do come in on time. 5%, I know it's probably hard to judge, but cash flow wise, how much does that sort of bolster the sort of I don't know, money we have at hand situation?
So thanks for the question, Councillor. So based on that, over the last couple of years, past history show that we get around about 20 million at the due date. 5%, if you ask me what would be the opportunity or money lost for 5%, then that would be around about $1 million.
Compared to
5% is 1 million, isn't it?
Yeah, 5% is 1 million. That is if we get the same profile of cash inflow of 20 million. Is that the question you're asking?
Yeah. Yeah. No. Thank you. I just need to know that how much what it actually does to the bottom line of our operating costs, and yeah, that sort of just makes it a little bit clearer for me. Thank you.
Speaker against.
Councillor Elphick.
Sorry, who's first?
I'll just ask a question, please.
I heard someone else first. I heard a female first.
It's Councillor Elphick.
Councillor Elphick.
Yes. Speaking against, I'm sort of in agree with what Councillor Thomas said, that at the moment this is an intention only and we can come down. I think aiming at people who have a lower income, 5%, the people who pay their rates account up front will do that probably regardless, and so they'll do that with 5%. The 10% will appeal to those sitting on the fence who may have the cash there, but in the current situation want to sit on it. And I think 10% is the biggest incentive at the moment for those who are going to sit on the fence and hold back, but 10% will push them over to pay it up front. So I'm just speaking against that, 5%.
Speaker for. Speaker against. I'll speak against, just briefly. Just in response, we've heard Councillor Tandy mention the worst has passed. We haven't even seen the start of what the economic damage of this will do, particularly as a city. And we've collected 95% of our rates this financial year already, so we haven't even seen the impacts other than realistically via the airport and obviously offsetting show revenue at QPT and Aquarena and the like. We're nowhere near at the start of this. JobKeeper and all those things, we're nowhere near the start. I can use a personal example as a corporate landlord. We have a gym that can't trade. They are on zero income. Beauticians, massage parlours, zero income. Dining restaurants, obviously doing some takeaway. Pubs, zero income. This is not a minor reduction of these entities. And again, we are using best guesses at the moment as to when these things might come back. And we do get some more time. This is an intention to consider, is to set some framework around what this might look like. And, if Councillor Tanty's optimistic view of the world that we'll all fly in tomorrow and we'll all be going to Bali by August occurs, then in June we can make adjustment for that during the budget deliberations, which we have to do as council. But when I'm talking to all those businesses that are shut, they are on zero. And indeed, a lot of these businesses will now be funding government handouts a month in arrears. The JobKeeper payment for those that are eligible is paid in arrears. There will be businesses whose payroll might be $10,000 a week is now going to go to $20,000 a week because they've got all little small casuals or like they might have been with them for 12 months or part-time. And they're going to have to fund that with bridging finance, with bridging loans, with overdrafts. And I'm talking now as an accountant. We have not at all seen what this is going to look like until, well, I'm not saying you're going to know until June, but I'd rather have the option out there at June or as an idea so we can set some frame and the executive can go away and do their necessary modelling and that, and obviously then feed into our budget deliberations going forward. That's what those impacts are, and if councillors present a better argument at the time for 5 or 10 or whatever that number might be, then we've got plenty of opportunity to take that in. But we need to signal that these are not normal times. These are not going to be business as usual any time, and certainly the worst hasn't passed. What we're trying to do is ensure that we survive the worst, in my view. Thank you.
Do I have a right reply, Mr. Mayor?
I haven't got there yet, but you certainly will. Speaker for. Speaker against. Councillor Douglas, your right of reply.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of comments that are in respect to the comments made by Councillor Thomas and Elphick and yourself, Mr. Mayor. I think if this motion is passed if the original motion is passed at 10%, there was a comment that was made by a few of the councillors and yourself, Mr. Mayor, that we could always look at it and reduce it. There is absolutely a snowflake's chance in hell of once the 10% goes through as a motion, that you were then going to go out to the community and say, oh, by the way, it's only 5% or 6%. Absolutely no way. What you could do is go 5% and we've considered everything. In fact, we're going to go 10%. That would be very well received if that's what's needed. There is no way you can go from 10%, if that's supported, down to 5%. I'm sorry, that argument does not stack up in any logical sense whatsoever. My other concern, of course, is the services. We're going to, if it is 10%, there's going to have to be, as we will be anyway, a real close look at the services we offer. That's not necessarily a bad thing, and perhaps it's a good opportunity to do so, but that'll happen whether it's 5% or 10%. I'm very wary that 10% is just going to put another $1 million millstone around our futures. Thank you.
Thank you. I had one last question from Councillor Hall. Oh, so no, we're going to conclude debate. Yeah. Sorry, I missed that one. No, we've concluded debate.
Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Hall.
No, that was all right. I'll bring it up in the next part to Mr. Adele, and then I'll spend.
Councillors, we're now putting this item to the vote. The amendment.
Point of order there, Mr. Mayor.
So I'm just tallying the vote, Councillor Clune. That motion is, the amendment is defeated 7-6.
Could I have the point of order, please, Mr. Mayor?
Point of order, Councillor Clune.
Well, I see Councillor Tanti has voted twice in that amendment. It's come up on the screen. I don't know if that's correct or not. One's yes and one's no. So could that be clarified, please?
No, I haven't got that. Yeah. Oh, I've got a no down here. I didn't scroll down that far.
Yeah, I've got a yes as well.
I've got a yes and a no.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you've got a yes and a no. So your first vote will be the one that's taken, Councillor Tanti.
That's good. It was a yes.
Yeah, so that motion is still defeated 7-6.
Oh, we'll go for a shot anyway.
You bet. That's what we're here for. So that the original motion becomes a substantive motion. No one has spoken to it yet other than the mover and the seconder. Do I have a speaker against?
Yeah, Councillor Parker.
Councillor Parker.
I'd just like to foreshadow an amendment to my motion sort of thing. Foreshadow the motion. Yep. I'd just like to move that the council do not increase residential rates in 2020 and 21 financial budget. As an incentive to promote early payments of rates in full within 30 days of being issued, I propose that 30 of the ratepayers who do so to be randomly selected to win $1,000 cash through the council. Why I'm saying this is, we were talking 10%, which is a loss of between 1.9 and 2.2 million. Now we get 20 million in of rates. Of those rates, we lose $600 per ratepayer. As the rates the 10% discount will not be on the land, will be not on the rubbish collection or the emergency services. So your rates are going to be, for your 10% discount on 3,000 is only going to be $240.
So Councillor Parker, just hold for a sec. So I've got that you foreshadowed that motion. Are you now moving to speak against?
Yeah.
Okay. So continue on, please.
Yeah. What we've seen over the past 5 or 6 years, and I know in the climate we're in now with COVID-19, it's completely different. But most of the people that have paid these 20 million in the first month are our elderly people that pay everything in full. I am for one that pay off my rates and paid the penalty, which is the interest and everything, only because I do not have the money at the time for my portfolio. These people, the incentive is great, but I just foresee in the year to come the hardship that people are going to have, and I take my hat off to the present mayor and CEO for their direction that they forecast two months ago with this COVID. We were the first on the ground floor to look at cost savings and everything like that, and we were the forefront for most councils. Now every council is going to be doing it hard, but to lose between 1.9 and 2.2 million in revenue is going to be very hard to catch up. What Councillor Douglas spoke earlier on, we're giving them $3 million worth of assets by waiving fees and charges for sporting things. And why I've come up with the 30 people is that we voted 2 months ago for the battery operated car through the RAC, the bus, that was going to be a donation of $30,000 towards that. And seeing that didn't eventuate, I thought, well, it's a good idea to give incentive for people to pay their rates up front, but no discount. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Speaker for. Speaker against. Further speakers of persuasion.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Caldwell, I'll speak for.
Thank you, Councillor Caldwell.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I guess most of us at some point since 2013 or indeed later if we were recently elected have probably committed to a reduction in rates. And we've certainly been able to bring the rate of increases down over the last 5.5 years. And the city to be congratulated for being able to find ways to do that. That's taken a lot of pressure off. However, lowering the trend in increases is not really the same at all as reducing rates, and that's something that I ran on in 2013 and subsequently, and that's something I would really like to see. And as sad as this COVID virus and its impact is, there is really a chance for governments everywhere to reset things and start again and think differently. And I see the motion before us as trying to achieve two things, and they've already been mentioned, but to encourage early payment of rates so that the range of level of services can be planned and reliably delivered next year. The more revenue we can attract in, and the earlier we can attract it, the more solid our plannings for this service delivery will be for 2021. And therefore, the better the community's ability to rely on what we say we're going to deliver. So the discount's really important, I think, in attracting early payments. But the other reason is to reduce the actual cost of rates to the community, to acknowledge the massive impact, financial impact, economic impact of this virus. And I think if we're going to discount rates in acknowledgement of the financial impact, and the Mayor's alluded to some of that already, It needs to be a substantial discount. It needs to make a real difference to people's cash flows through the year. And I also note that whatever discount we arrive at, if indeed we do arrive at a discount, some or all of that could potentially be offset if we reconfigure the way we deliver services, but that's an issue for a later debate. To achieve both those outcomes, to encourage early payment of rates and to provide financial relief to the community, I'm convinced that nothing less than 10% reduction will get that job done. So I'm asking for councillors to help the community and support the 10% reduction as proposed. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Speaker against? Speaker for?
Yes, I'd like to speak if I may, Your Worship.
Councillor Hall.
Yeah, before I speak, can I just ask Mr. Adalj, in respects to our ratepayer base, how many years have we had success at large percentage? Looking at the previous item on the agenda where 95% of the people paid their rates in a year, have we had a very good record of people paying their rates over years past?
Director Adalj.
Yes, we have one of the best records in the state in regards to collection rates. I mean, we come close to 100% every year. In saying that, that 100% doesn't represent just the current year rates, it represents arrear rates as well. So we normally get close to 99%, and you would say in the low 90% would be your current year rates, and the other percentage would be arrear rates from previous years. So to answer your question, yes, we have a very good collection rate, and we always have.
Right. Thank you very much. Now, leading into my comment for the 10%, as a council of long standing here and seen us as our ratepayers have gone through a fair amount of turbidity over the years in respects to our rates and rate issues. And the fact of the matter is, while Steve raised some very good points in respects to a dropping to the 5%, I think we've got to show our people a little bit of feeling and compassion in respects to the grief we've dealt out over the past couple of years, mindful of the fact that the money that we may well lose could at some stage later on be picked up or dealt with in a diverse fashion. And I think we basically owe it to those people in our community to give them some sort of incentivation. Looking at the 95% on that last reports reading, and hence my question is, I think we have a very reliable community who will meet that. I, for one, am one of those people that pays my rates straight up because I'm in a position I can do it. But the fact is, I expect that because the city gives service delivery, and I think a lot of people, by paying their rates, understand that we give that good service delivery. And this will show us in good stead of not being the mediocres of rate increases going back to the so-called 7.6 era or whatever the case may be. It's showing an element of compassion over this year, because who knows how long this is going to go for. But I think we can owe it to our people on the humanity side just to do this. Whilst it was very eloquent of Steve putting the dollars and cents to it, for the sake of 1.5 million and maybe 2, I think we can collectively adjust those books with service delivery and other things. You know, perhaps the waiving of fees is not a pill that many people want to take, but I'm more so concerned for the people out there that this is a one-off situation to give them a good showing and show that we have compassion and understanding, and we need that money in as quickly as possible to keep our community rolling along. And I think it's very, very important, and willingly I accept that a 10% is the only way to go. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Keamy, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. Aren't we what exactly was Councillor Parker's amendment before? Aren't we talking about that?
No, he's foreshadowed a motion, Councillor Keamy.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So if this motion fails, his motion is essentially largely the same, but with no discount and $30,000 worth of prizes for incentives.
So that was about the only addition, the incentive and no discount.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Speaker against, Councillor Douglas.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm not going to go through my arguments for the 5% and against the 10. I've done that. I thought Councillor Hall's outline was particularly telling, I'd have to say. and very convincing. And I agree with those sentiments, as I agree with yours, Mr. Mayor, as well. However, I do believe that 10% is just taking a little bit too far, and I do believe it's going to cause us more pain potentially down the track. So I just wanted to have it on the record that the intent I totally support, and I totally support a discount, I totally support the waiver and everything else in the item. I just don't agree with the figure, and it's only that I'm going to be voting against. I just want that to be very clearly understood, because I think the intent, we all, I think, are very well intentioned as to the intent. It's just the number that I'm going to be voting against. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker for. Speaker against. No further speakers. A right of reply. Just quickly, councillors, another aspect people have touched on is corporate people and old people that pay their rates. We've heard that. Well, a lot of corporate landlords actually don't pay their rates. They pass them on to their tenants. That's actually the common, unless you hold both your land and your trading entity in the same entity. The decision a corporate's going to have to make is, are they going to be able to pass on those outgoings? And obviously the state government and the federal government in particular, has already said they can't. If you can demonstrate your turnover has been affected by coronavirus under the Code of Conduct, they'll have to capitalise. They'll eventually be able to recoup the outgoings, but they won't be able to. But they will have to not be able to unpass them, and that's going to see people struggle. So the landlord themselves will have the option of either paying up front and making the 10% and then passing it back down, or they'll just sit there and not pay it because they'll wait until the period of time comes that they can either terminate their tenant or for arrears or not. So it's a bit of a concern in that space. If I was a pensioner, or anyone for that, actually it doesn't even have to be a pensioner, if I don't have any incentive to pay at all up front, there is just no reason in my right mind why I would. It would just make no sense. And the risk that presents to us is that we won't know if the fall in collections is coronavirus related or the removal of the interest instalment related. We just won't know. So it's a bit of an unknown, it's a bit of a guessing game, and we get to take some of that certainty out of it. When you heard from Director Radalj, 1 in 10 people are paid, or dollar value anyway, rates in arrears already. That's now 1 in 10. I don't know what the number's going to be going forward, but I suggest we're already at 1 in 10. It's going to get significantly higher as unemployment skyrockets to who knows where, 20, 30%. There are people lying up at Stanley still today. So it is about certainty, but look, we have got budget coming up. I appreciate everyone's pretty on the same sort of page. We're all looking for ways to stimulate. We're all looking for ways to get money in. You know, and that wasn't the intent. The intention is to feel where we're at. It also means we get the community, and, you know, and at 10% there's going to have to be some decisions, some harder decisions on levels of service. And let's see what the community appetite for that is like. You know, whether that can be done by some surveys, some polling, whatever. I mean, everyone's going to want no rates, and everyone's going to want all their services. I mean, that's typical for how the community relates. But we can actually have a conversation about that with a bit of background. So, councillors, I ask you to support my motion. Voting now.
Councillor Alfiki, are we voting for the foreshadowed one or for your motion?
No, we're voting for my motion.
Your motion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr Mayor, I'm having trouble voting, but I am Councillor Forenza here. I'm voting yes.
Thank you.
Oh, that's tricky.
Voted twice.
Yeah, he's got the one yes. It's stay at the same vote.
Who knows?
3.
I'm just trying to get there, sorry. Councillor Elphick. Yes, Councillor Tanti was.
2 at Douglas.
Yes. 1, 2, 3. That item is carried 10-3. Against was Clune, Parker, and Douglas. Item 12.3, reports of infrastructure services. There are nil. Item 12.4, reports of the Office of the CEO. Item CEO 064, Council Policy. CP 415, affixation of the Common Seal.
I'll move that, Your Worship.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor. Councillor Colliver.
Moved Councillor Hall, seconded Councillor Colliver. Wish to speak to your motion?
I'll just simply state that it actually just puts the due practice on what we do, and it's an entitlement we should have to endorse it with the Common Seal.
Thank you. Councillor Colliver?
Yes, likewise, it's you know, it is actually a governance issue, and it's in compliance with S 9.49A of the LG Act. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against this item? There being none in opposition, I'll declare that motion carried. Item CEO 065, COVID-19 procurement decisions and proposed future actions. Councillor wishes to move from the floor the executive recommendation as presented, plus an additional 4 points. Is that we commence opening up public toilets in high traffic areas and monitor them for vandalism and theft of supplies in compliance with state health directives. That we start returning the city's barbecues to service. That we open up the Ellendale Pool camping ground, and note that the state government has directed that playgrounds are to remain closed. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Mr Mayor. Councillor Colliver.
Councillor Colliver, thank you. Councillors, so as you're aware, between the agenda going out and this meeting tonight, you know, limitations on outdoor gatherings have been lifted from 2 to 10 people, not 9 unrelated, and then all the other myriad other rules. You've got some people from the house and all those sorts of things. So they will be lifted. Camping restrictions have been wiped out. Boating, recreational is all fully endorsed now, and the like. We all surrounding shires have all reopened up, reopening their public toilets. I know up in Northampton and Chapman Valley, they've certainly reopened up their camping areas and their toilets. You know, when it comes to things like toilets, we obviously notice that I'm certainly fielding, and I know the staff are fielding significant complaints about people having to urinate and defecate in bushes and parkland and the like. Fascinating wise too, we're getting quite fascinating wise, we're also getting significant complaints from RV campers going and moving and parking and setting up camp where toilets might be open or near somewhere or more secluded spots, which of course is why we invented the RV spots in the first place. So we need to look at a staged opening up. It is written intentionally for the CEO to have a look at the high traffic areas and slowly work them out, because whether it's a big bang or not, but we'll allow that to be an operational decision. But we need to show that we can ease up a bit in keeping with the state government's directives, and that's why, of course, we just note that playgrounds are closed. We make the point, as we always do, that today there's still no federal and state financial incentives, and indeed early talks are that they're probably going to be punishing us more than they'll be assisting us if we don't take steps going forward to see what they look at. And as for all those other RFTs, well, that's been a state government initiative to allow us to roll them over, and that's saved us in compliance costs and all those sorts of things. And hopefully we just get on with continuing the work. That'll actually allow us to get cracking on the work in the recovery and not get held up by delays and tendering and all the like. So for the time it comes to flick a switch on a project, we're all good to go. So probably might lighten up a few council agendas too if we've got a few less tenders going through for that period anyway. Thank you. Councillor Colliver.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will reserve the right. I think you've covered it beautifully. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, councillors? Are there any speakers against? No speakers against, no speakers seconding. I'll declare that motion carried unanimously. Item 12.5, reports to be received. RR14, reports to be received April.
I'll move both parts, please, parts A and B. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Councillor Hall.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor. Councillor Colliver.
Second, Councillor Colliver. Thank you. Just to speak to your motion.
It's purely a due process we go through. That's all, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Councillor Colliver.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
So you wish to speak against or to this item? No speakers. I'll declare that motion carried. Item 13, motions by members of which previous notice has been given. Item NM13, notice of motion, Abrolhos Islands Tourism. Councillor Tanti, I envision you have a motion.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I support my motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
I'm happy to second. Councillor Douglas.
Councillor Douglas, thank you. Councillor Tanti, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, councillors, I'm sure you will have read my comments and why I've put this motion up, but it's basically to ask the state government to fast track the opening of the Abrolhos Islands for mainstream and managed tourism. To summarise what I'm at, the COVID-19 pandemic is ending, but I do take on board the Mayor's comments that the recovery will take probably a whole lot longer. And it might be, we might be in for a long recession, but we do need to think ahead and try and position ourselves to take advantage of the recovery when it comes. Secondly, tourism is labour intensive. It creates jobs and investment. And let's not forget, tourism is about 3% of our economic activity. So clearly there's a lot of room for growth. Thirdly, I note that Tourism WA is talking about making wildflowers our promotional handle, which is great. But there are other places that can also use wildflowers as a tourist attraction: Hyden, the Goldfields, Central Wheatbelt, Esperance, the Gascoyne, Murchison. Wildflowers are not unique to the Midwest, and neither are history. That we've got some great history, great beaches and great weather. Other places have those advantages, or some of them. What we do have that is unique in the world is the Abrolhos Islands. Fourthly, there is a market for tourism on the Abrolhos Islands that's just waiting to be tapped. It's not just international and interstate, but just down the road there are 2 million people in Perth, and we need to note that in peak season, when roads to places in the southwest such as Busselton and Margaret River are clogged with traffic, it's actually quicker and far safer to get to Geraldton. We just have to give people a reason to come here. And finally, councillors, Mr Mayor, I'd like to draw your attention to a comment by the Minister for Tourism, David Templeman, which was, stop being petty and asking for assistance, step up and bring forward works and capital programs. No, that's fine. And that's why I think we need to let the state government know that fast-tracking mainstream and managed tourism on the Abrolhos Islands, complete with accommodation and associated facilities, is our best way of doing just that. It's just a matter of the state government basically letting it happen. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. My fellow councillors may recall that Councillor Tanti introduced a similar motion early this year that was calling on the city to take carriage of an investment process, if you like, for the city to canvass potential investors, take that information back to the city, etc., etc. At the time, I moved a separate motion suggesting that should go to the Abrolhos Islands interagency team, which was all very good. We all knew that was going to take a bit of time. But I think we're at a slightly different situation now. And I think, as Councillor Tanti, I think correctly is pointing out, time has gone on. We are in a fairly difficult situation, not just us, but the whole state. And as well as the interagency team doing its bit, doing whatever it's doing, it's going to take a while because government does. I think we have the chance as a local council now to perhaps put the foot down a little bit more firmly, in a positive way, in response not just to the virus, but into the whole economic situation the whole state and the Midwest is going to find itself in. So while I previously may have urged a little bit of caution and go through the proper protocols and process, I think we're living in different times, and I commend Councillor Tanti for coming back again and again and again, but coming back again this time with an urgent motion to get this moving along. And I, for one, am right behind him on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker against.
Yes, Mr Mayor. Councillor Colliver.
Councillor Colliver.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I would just like to point out, amongst a few other things, that previously Council has supported tourism at the Abrolhos through the growth plan, through our Abrolhos Island tourism policy. We also had it on our list for the 2017 state government election priorities. We had a motion that came to council on the 18th of December 2018. We had another motion again on the 26th of November 2019. And we also need to note that the CEO is a member of the interagency project team. Okay, so I think it's just important that we sort of highlight how much support council already has thrown towards tourism at the Abrolhos. In terms of Councillor Tanti's motion to us that's on the table today, point number one, the way that reads, I think that is subjective. Last time I looked, it wasn't illegal to visit the islands, so I think some of the points he's made there is subjective. Doesn't sit very well with me. Note 3, point 3, note that restricting tourism visitation to the islands to day trips. I haven't actually heard that, so I'm not sure if that is subjective as well. And in terms of point A, B and C of point 3, you know, I think we need to acknowledge that sits outside of our jurisdiction at the islands. That is the role of government, is to develop the framework and the public infrastructure needs for tourism at the Abrolhos. I've said this many times and I still have that point of view. Also, point 4, so direct CEO to commitment from state government to accelerate the process. Yes, we already know that there is money allocated in the budget to be spent, so we know that that is in play. We also know that stage 2, that the Midwest Development Commission are running, the $14 million second stage for the Abrolhos is well advanced, and I'm pretty confident that that would make it through to any stimulus project or program that the state government might be considering for recovery. Point 5, that actually reads to me like it's suggesting that the CEO get himself an invitation to attend a cabinet meeting. I actually think that that is an unjust use of the CEO's resources to be pursuing such an outcome. So I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Speaker 4. Speaker against? I'll actually speak against this one too, surprisingly. For much the same reason that Councillor Colliver has said, we already have a significant amount of affirmation of support for the islands, and I don't want to, and I have seeking no intention of reducing that level of support. But to state that day trips are suboptimal, we have a 280-seat fast ferry coming around the coast as we speak. It's actually currently at the horizontal falls in the Kimberley. And we're looking for a home and looking for jetty developments. And there is money, and the Development Commission is looking for money to do with places to dock fast ferry jetties and all the services. Day trips are an absolute essential part of opening up the Abrolhos Islands. And as Councillor Collins said, it is currently not illegal. And when it says that fishing and other activities are currently unregulated and unmonitored, that's simply not true. In fact, it's actually bureaucratic. If you want to go and fish at the Abrolhos Islands, you actually have to register online with the Department of Fisheries and noting your licence number, and you have all the bag limits. And there are fisheries, if they don't meet you at the jetty, they meet you on the boat while they're out there, and it's not actually uncommon to be challenged by them while we're out there. I do know the significant contributions it will make, but I don't think this motion assists going further. And look, trying to commandeer video conferences with all those people, we're flat out getting David Templeman to actually be nice to us at the moment as local government minister. I can't imagine he's going to at all tolerate us trying to get hold of him that way. The minister is, Ilana Martinez, obviously tied up with the Development Commission in the stage 2, and let's face it, the state budget's not being launched until October this year anyway. They've put back their budget quite a way. So I just think it's a bit of overreach in some of the language that's used. Notwithstanding that, I do fully support Abrolhos Islands tourism, as is long established council policy. We have a council policy for that. I think some of the language in here is a bit too robust. Speaker 4, which is unusual coming from me, I suppose. Speaker against? Councillor Tanti, your right of reply.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Well, again, councillors, the thrust of my motion is to simply ask the state government, can you fast track tourism on the islands? It will ultimately happen. In what form, we don't know yet. The interagency project team, that's fantastic. They're going to be releasing a draft management report in June 2021, and that's a draft report. So there'll be yet more discussion to follow and more input from other people. So who knows when the final report will be released. It is council policy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for mentioning that. But in fact, we can go back to 1992 when a state government report recommended tourism on the islands. And 1992, what's that, 28 years ago, and a long time for not much to happen. These are, as Councillor Douglas said, different times that we live in. A lot of things have changed. The pandemic has obviously had a big impact on our economy. The recession that almost certainly will happen and might be a bad one is another thing that's very different that we didn't have to worry about just a few months ago. We need to find ways to increase revenue. I understand it's not illegal to visit the islands. However, it's not cost effective. It's cheaper to go and go to Shark Bay and spend 2 or 3 days at Denham. It's not a problem to do that. It's probably cheaper to go to Bali in some ways. It's expensive to get to the island. The flight costs hundreds of dollars, and that's to visit like a half-day trip. That's to visit one beach on one island, and that's not going to attract a whole lot of tourists. There are boat charters, which are great, but they tend to take days, and not everybody's into a boat charter. One of the roles of our council is to bat for Geraldton. And again, Mr. Mayor, councillors, all I'm saying is let's ask the state government, can you guys consider expediting the process to allow tourism with accommodation and facilities on the islands? Let's ask the question. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tandy. Councillors will now put this item to the votes.
Any double votes? Yeah.
Yes. That motion is lost 8-5. Douglas voted yes. Councillor, item 14, questions from members of which due notice has been given. There are none. Item 15, new business of an urgent nature introduced by decision of the meeting. There is none. Item 16, meeting closed to the public. There is no confidential items. So I now close this meeting at 6:23 p.m. on Tuesday the 20th of April 2020. Thank you all for actually having quite a very smooth e-meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.